We're turning now to our last model of industrial change. Again, this is week 3, models of discontinuous change. This is a model produced by Anita McGann, University of Toronto. She is a economic historian, among other skills, and studied the evolution of history of the emergence of technology in a variety of industries. And she applied some very neat logic. It is as follows. Strategy cannot succeed and more or less accurately anticipates the future, and says that it's really tough to anticipate the future, of course, because of all the noise and fuss and things, and you just don't know what's going on. So she suggests focus, specifically focus on what is core to your service and delivery. And that is, what are the core assets that you need to deliver goods and service value to your customer? And what are the core activities that account for your success? And thinking only about the core and only about those activities, keep on asking yourself the question, are those going to be relevant for tomorrow? And what do I need to do to make them more relevant, more valuable in the future? If change in the future is such that you think that those activities need to change, you better learn how to do something else. If a different set of assets are required, make that investment. If the old assets are still relevant, or maybe perhaps declining in importance, it would also affect how you make investment decisions. So, thinking about what's going to happen in your market in the face of technological change is an important thing, and there are benefits to thinking about core activities and core assets. And she then develops a model that simply says what happens when your core activities are threatened or not threatened, and your core assets are threatened or not threatened. If neither core activities or core assets are threatened, you're basically facing incremental change. It's going to be gradual. This type of change is characteristic in commodity industries where market demand is stable, manufacturers centralized, all that sort of stuff. If the core assets are not threatened, they continue to be important, but the activities is are becoming less important. What happens is a form of change she calls mediated. She's arguing that the relationships that once made you valuable and important to your customers are no longer quite as valuable. So this is would be the process of something becoming standardized, commoditized. All of a sudden, the skills and the relationships and the investment you made in customer support is no longer necessary. The product is bought more or less on price. That's a sort of mediated type of change. Now, what's interesting is when you take a look at the threatened core assets related to activities. If your core assets are threatened, but your core activities remain viable, what's happening is that you need to work on customer relationships, but you have to strip your capital out of the model and find new ways to deliver goods and services and constantly reinvest in new assets needed to support the relationship as things change. Think here in the accounting industry, you have core activity remains unchanged, but any host of the supporting technologies, mainly information technology, became a very important part of the accounting industry. That was a new thing. When you talk about when both core activities and core assets are being threatened, it's time for radical change. You know you got to shut down. You have to take your assets out and do something different. You also know that if you change into a related industry, probably not so good. In strategy classes, you'll talk about the benefits of related diversification. The exception to that rule is when you're faced with decline. When when your industry is suffering and declining, going into a related market's not going to do you much good. It's time for radical change. So we start to see different models of change here. Let me go back in, and we can describe incremental change as characteristic of a variety of industries. Here we see retailing, consumer banking, airlines. Mediated change examples include automobile dealers, travel agents, full line departments. Um, It's a challenge. Mediated change is challenging because the service that you're providing is under threat. You continue to believe it's valuable, but you can see what happens. Creative change is fascinating. Again, you're trying to keep on developing skill, but with your asset base changing, you're constantly struggling to maintain competencies. It's a real challenge. And again, radical change requires a move. The trick here is timing. The industries don't decline, product markets don't decline steeply, they don't just drop off a wall. Instead, they tend to dribble off, and sometimes they sustain for an awful long time. The original computer chip, the 8088, was introduced in 1982, maybe 83, and it still had a significant market in 1996. I can't remember how large it was, but it was astonishing that it was the second or third most valuable computer chip on the marketplace in 1996, even though it was highly underpowered. What had happened? It turned out to be the engine. It was the chip that was adopted in the manufacture and early automation of any number of consumer products, and so it had utility. So even if it looks like the market is going away, the question is when and how fast. If we want to think about what type of change is characteristic in the marketplace, she did the calculation for us. Incremental 43%, mediated 32, radical 19, creative 6%. So she's taking a look at this sorts of change. It's a wonderful article. Again, Anita McGann. I can provide you greater references later. And those are our models of disruptive technologies and discontinuous technologies. Next week, we're shifting our focus from technology creation to questions concerning appropriation. That is, given models of change and in the face of innovation, how do you appropriate, how do you benefit from those changes? Talk to you next week.